For Bulbul, the forest isn't a landscape, it's a series of hiding spots. Navigating the isolated woods, she exists at the absolute mercy of an environment where survival is tied to staying invisible. But that invisibility ends when she spots something buried in the dirt. Her hands scrape away the soil to reveal a pulsing, glowing red gemstone, a concentrated source of potential sitting in the palms of someone with no way to protect it. Sudden wealth is a dangerous liability for the powerless. Almost immediately, a wealthy landlord spots the glow from a distance, and his focus shifts from the woods to the girl. He doesn't stop to negotiate. Driven by the belief that anything of value belongs to him by right, he sprints after her, closing the gap with every stride. Panicked, Bulbul retreats to her last remaining shelter, a dilapidated, ruined mud house. She slams the door shut, but the landlord is already there, hammering on the wood and demanding she hand over the stone. Locking the door is a temporary fix, but it exposes the central problem. A strategy based entirely on hiding is unsustainable. You cannot perpetually outrun greed when you lack the means to push back. Inside the house, the walls feel like they are closing in. The landlord's relentless screaming from the other side of the door pushes Bulbul toward a total psychological collapse. Cowering in the corner, her fear eventually turns into a cold, clarifying exhaustion. She asks herself the one question that changes her trajectory. How long will I be scared? Possession of the stone alone doesn't trigger its magic. The power remains dormant until it recognizes a shift in her will, the moment her internal dialogue moves from a victim's plea to an owner's demand. The stone responds to that shift. A blinding explosion of red light fills the room, coalescing into a towering, shadowy djinn. It speaks with a voice that vibrates through the floorboards, offering her two wishes. Firm, deliberate. Bulbul doesn't ask for a pile of gold. She understands that wealth without defense is just a target. She demands an end to her poverty, but follows it with a request for the unshakable strength to never feel fear again. Look at this as a vulnerability equation. If you place resources on one side of the scale without adding defensive capability to the other, the system instantly collapses. Equilibrium is only possible when personal internal agency provides the necessary counterweight to external assets. The magic immediately overwrites her reality. The crumbling mud walls expand and smooth out, morphing into high, glowing marble pillars. The ruined hut is replaced by the architecture of a palace. Bulbul herself is transformed. The physical signs of poverty vanish, replaced by the posture of someone who finally occupies her own space with authority. Her shoulders are square and her chin is high. The most significant change, however, is in her gaze. The frantic, darting look of the hunted has been replaced by the steady eyes of the formidable. The landlord's leverage depended entirely on Bulbul's terror. By erasing that fear and stabilizing her environment, she has effectively removed the only tools he knew how to use. This suggests that empowerment isn't a single event. It's a two-step process that requires both an external change in circumstances and an internal conquest of the self. The next morning, the landlord returns. He arrives with the same arrogant expectation he's always had, that the girl will still be small and the stone will be easy to take. Instead, he finds a palace, and standing at the center of it is the same woman he chased, but she isn't running anymore. She is standing her ground. Bullying requires a partner who is willing to be intimidated. When Bulbul refuses to play her part, the landlord's confidence evaporates, replaced by a sudden, desperate urge to retreat. Bulbul doesn't wait for him to leave. She declares that his era of exploitation is over, forcing him to face the reality that his power was always contingent on her silence. As he tries to flee, the ground itself seems to recoil. The magic she now commands traps him in place, mirroring the way he once trapped her in her own home. His skin begins to gray and harden. His movements stiffen until his entire body is turned into cracked stone. He becomes a permanent statue, a physical manifestation of his own cold, unyielding greed. This outcome shows the fragility of a bully's authority. When the person they targeted withdraws their fear and demands accountability, the entire structure of that predator's power tends to implode under its own weight. With the threat gone, Bulbul makes a final choice. Instead of hoarding her new resources behind the palace walls, she uses them to uplift the entire village. The community prospers because she realizes a basic truth. Power is most effective when it is used to provide security for others, rather than to demand it for yourself. It is a strange quirk of human behavior, though. You can watch a story about the end of greed and the triumph of courage, and yet the impulse to support the story with a like or subscribe often vanishes the moment the video ends. Fables like this give us the blueprint for facing our fears, but moving from the story to the real world, that requires a daily active choice to be as brave as the woman who stood her ground.